something to it so we don't hear 7 repeats here. So we at this time will open the hearing on Senate Bill 57. And we're going to have the bill overview with Nick Myers, Assistant Revisor, Kansas Revisor of Statutes. Nick, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, committee. Committee, Senate Bill 57, this would amend current law to require that reimbursement be provided to certain entities that operate communications and also utility facilities when it's necessary to modify or relocate those facilities in certain road and highway projects. So I'm going to cover this section by section of those sections that are in the bill. So Section 1 would amend KSA 68402B, and this statute deals with federal aid, transportation federal aid monies, and federal contracts that the federal government makes available for road, highway projects. So in this section, if any county, city, or political subdivision enters into or is a beneficiary of a contract that involves any of this federal money, the contract, and this section would require that contract to include provisions that make a requirement to pay for the cost of relocates for communications facilities. So the way that this would happen in the bill is that if a relocate or modification to a communications facility is required with one of these federal aid projects, that the owner or operator of that communications facility could then bill the county, the city, or the political subdivision, or the Secretary of Transportation for the cost that they incurred to relocate that facility and request reimbursement for that cost. The bill would require that the reimbursement payment be made in full within 90 days following the receipt of the reimbursement request. And my memo and the bill both show the definition for a communications facility that would be included in this provision. So these communications facilities that I am referring to in this section mean facilities that are owned or operated by a telecommunications provider, a video services provider, or a broadband internet access service provider. So Section 2 of the bill, so Section 1 was federal money. Section 2 of the bill deals with state highway projects. This would amend KSA 68415 to require that when the Secretary of Transportation orders a modification or relocation of utility facilities or communications facilities, as I just described the definition for communications facilities, for any state highway project, the Secretary of Transportation shall make provision for the payment of the costs that are associated with that relocate or the modification. And the same provisions would apply for repayment. So an invoice would be sent to the Secretary of Transportation, and then payment shall be made within 90 days following the receipt of that request for reimbursement. This bill would require or maintain the requirement that if an entity does not comply with a request from the Secretary to relocate the facilities, the Secretary may still undertake those modifications or relocations and then require the Secretary to require the entity, the entity to reimburse the Secretary for those costs that the Secretary incurred to relocate. So essentially the entity needs to get on this if this bill were to be enacted and comply with an order of the Secretary to be reimbursed for these costs. This bill would also maintain the authority of the Secretary to expedite the process by advancing monies to any entity that has a demonstrated financial need for monies to effectuate the relocate or modification. However, the law would be changed to remove the requirement that any of those advanced monies be repaid by the entity, and instead, that would just be subtracted out of the reimbursement request. Lastly, Section 3 of the bill amends KSA 68-2005, and this relates to the Kansas Turnpike Authority. So current law provides that the Turnpike Authority shall pay costs to modify or relocate facilities of public utilities and pipeline operators. What this section would do, it would include facilities of video service providers and providers of broadband internet access services within that requirement. So these video service providers and broadband providers would clearly be included under this reimbursement provision for the Kansas Turnpike Authority. And Mr. Chairman and committee members, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Good job, Nick. Committee, we got any questions? Senator Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're, my understanding, going to actually get a copy of the bill, but my question for you as the reviser is facilities. I think of a building. Would this be like lines or water pipes, sewer pipes, et cetera?
Yes, this would include lines, cables, wires, any of those appurtenant facilities to these communications facilities and communications avenues.
You used facilities twice.
I did. I was trying to think of a new word. Maybe I need a synonym, maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
But yes, it would include that.
Any other questions, committee? Okay, thank you, Nick. So we'll head into the proponent's oral. We have a Dayton Murdy, Senior Manager of Government Affairs, Charter Communications. Dayton, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Senate Utilities Committee. Again, my name is Dayton Murdy. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. We do business in the state of Kansas under the brand name Spectrum. We have about 118,000 customers in 25 communities, and we employ 850 Kansans. Last year, we invested an additional $37 million in private capital to expand broadband access to an additional 3,000 homes and small businesses. We support SB 57 because it requires reimbursement of utility relocations that are funded through state or federal dollars. When it comes to the section relating to state dollars, already reimbursed are oil companies, water, electric, even telecom or telegraph companies are already reimbursed, but companies like ours, who are a video service provider and provide broadband, are not. So we'd like to create parity for different types of utilities there and include our infrastructure to be reimbursed as well. And in relation to the federal dollars, originally, we had the concept of reimbursing for relocation in all instances. Our company pays franchise fees and permit fees for use of the right-of-way, and to us, that's for maintenance and use of that right-of-way service. It seems to us like we should not have to pay for the relocation when it's required, but out of deference to our local community partners and their budgets, we limited the bill to where it's only when they're being reimbursed by federal dollars for the cost of the project. So to use an analogy, if we were a renter of a property, it would be as if the landlord came to us and said, we need you to move out, but we're not going to pay for the cost of movers or for you to not be in the house anymore. But we still need you to pay rent, and you can come back in a month. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to us for that to be the way it happens, but we limited the bill to where it's only when the landlord's getting paid by someone else to make those changes. So if there's a relocation necessary for a project to move forward, we think that relocation should be considered part of the project and therefore must be reimbursed. But again, this is only limited to where those local governments are getting money from the federal or state government to do the project, and not all instances. So it's for these reasons that we support the passage of SB 57, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, committee, you got any questions for Dayton at this point? Okay, Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I'm not sure, I would assume that before you put the cable in the ground, you went through the planning and permitting process. What would cause someone to make you relocate or ask you to relocate?
Yeah, so there's a number of different instances where that could happen. It could be as simple as a beautification project at the local government level. They don't like aerial lines, and so they are asking us to move underground. Or it could be a street widening. They have a 2-lane highway, want to make it 4. Any instance where we would need to move to ensure safety or requirements of local governments, that's what we consider a forced relocation.
Committee, we got any other questions for Dayton? Senator Thompson.
With regard to the financial need, if some entity was needing some help. I missed the opportunity to ask this of the revisor, but what would the requirement be? I mean, they just can't cover the cost of the project? Is that what it would be? With regard to advancing money to the entity that has to make these changes?
So, I mean, my understanding of that section of law, which I believe is already there, would just be to make the process move quicker. So, I mean, we're not reimbursed right now, so in all instances, a local government will tell us, we need you to move, and we have to send people out at our own cost to do that. So I think that's just to quicken the process to advance that money.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. There's been a suggestion by some other conferees that federally funded or federal aid projects, other utilities are not reimbursed for modifying or relocating their facilities. So it seems to be inconsistent what you've just said. So just trying to figure out what the situation is.
So in state-funded projects, all utilities basically except us are reimbursed. We're requesting reimbursement for federal projects as well. And like I said, because we pay franchise fees for use of the right-of-way, for maintenance of the right-of-way, we pay permitting fees, and yet even when the project that is requiring the move is funded by someone that's not the local government, we're being asked to pay for that. So in instances where they're getting reimbursed by the federal government, we're asking that they also budget for the cost of the relocation, consider it a part of the project, and reimburse us for that.
And that would be part of their budget when they are working with the federal government on the federal project.
Yes, that's how we envision
That's
it.
what you would envision. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why is the turnpike included when they don't accept federal dollars?
For state as well, because we requested that the bill be drafted in a way that it reimburse for projects funded through the state or federal government, because in both instances, that doesn't come out of the budget of the local governments, and we wanted to pay deference to our local government partners and their budgets and not impact those or mitigate the impact on those.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to follow the timeline of what's happening. So you're asking to be reimbursed, but you're submitting the request for that reimbursement after you've done the work?
So generally, that is how the invoicing process would work. So we would, do the work and then say, this is how much we spend and invoice that to the local government.
So I'm assuming that the local government has to apply for funds, and if they want the funds to be included to cover these costs, they would probably need to have an estimate prior to that contract.
Absolutely. And I imagine that would work the same way it does with the state reimbursement, like I mentioned, and the revisor mentioned, any utility that's gas, electric, oil, water, telephone, or telegraph is already reimbursed for relocations on a state, in a project that receives state funds. So I imagine it would work the same way for us, adding us to those state projects and for federal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just interested in whether there would be an estimate so that that could be included in the contracted price.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we got them all. Dayton, thank you. The next person up for a proponent is Megan Bottenberg, Director of Government Affairs, Cox Communication. Megan, welcome to committee.
Good afternoon. I've got to lower this down. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you all today. Cox Communications, we serve 119 communities across the state, and in the past 5 years, we have expanded into unserved communities and about to expand even more into Jackson County, actually. We are excited about that, but that is using our own private dollars, while at the same time upgrading our current infrastructure so that all 119 franchise communities that we serve in Kansas now have multi-gig speeds for residents. So as you can see, we are not afraid to spend money by any means, which is why we are very supportive of the passage of Senate Bill 57. Like any business or individual household, we all have a finite budget. And we can spend only where we can spend within our limited budget constraints. In 2024, we spent $1.8 million in forced relocations across the state. Some of that was municipalities projects, some was KDOT projects, Turnpike project, different wide-ranging different projects. If you really want to see a list, happy to show you. But 1.45 million of that was due to public works projects in the communities that we serve. So we follow several statutes when it comes to line relocation. One is KSA 17-1902, which outlines municipalities and it literally states we are forced to move our lines in cities and counties for the public safety, health, and well-being of the community that we serve. Okay, we do that on a regular basis. Again, we're taking that cost ourselves. Again, while we're also upgrading our infrastructure and expanding at the same time. And we regularly work with cities and counties when they say they have a project and it could be state or federal funded. When that state or when that city or county says we have to move, we have to move, and we don't have a choice. Again, depends on road widening projects, bridge projects, upgrading the streets like infrastructure, so like a main line, or even in some instances, not in Kansas yet, but a streetcar project that's making us relocate. At the end of the day, we are paying franchise fees in that right-of-way, and we are simply asking already, again, access to the right-of-way, but we're asking for just some reimbursement of those lines. And I know my time is limited, so I'm going to quickly wrap up. But this is critical, because if we don't have this, again, it goes back to the budget. If we don't have some type of reimbursement, we're going to unfortunately widen and broaden the digital divide, because at some point you're going to have to make some tough decisions. And the last thing I want is for us to have to raise prices like any business has to, or have to not be able to expand into unserved areas. Again, this is about parity, about making sure everyone in the right-of-way has access, but also is treated the same. Thank you.
Committee, we got any questions for Megan? Okay, thank you. Okay, proponents written, we've got two of them that is in front of you in your folder. So at this time, we'll move to opposition oral. So first off is Jay Hall, Deputy Director and General Counsel, Kansas Association of Counties. Jay, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I am Jay Hall, the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Kansas Association of Counties. Our primary concern with Senate Bill 57 is that this could result in an increase in property taxes. As you know, most of county government is funded through property taxes, and so increased costs at the county level are passed on and absorbed by the county property taxpayer. That is our primary concern here. I've heard it talked about by some of the previous conferees about these costs only being for either projects funded through state dollars or federal dollars. When you look at the county road and bridge budget, however, the county dollars go into that budget along with the state dollars and the federal dollars. There are very few projects at the county level that are funded exclusively through local dollars. And so as a result, this bill would actually probably touch on the majority of projects that are undertaken by our local governments. And that is a primary concern, because when we look at some of the projects that are undertaken, often those projects are funded through some federal dollars or some state dollars, but there is a local component to it. And so increasing those costs would still result in a potential tax increase for our local residents, or it would result in us not being able to carry out as many projects because of the nature of the cost of those projects. And so that's the primary concern that we have with Senate Bill 57. Due to the nature of time, I will stop my testimony there and stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me an example of some of those costs that the county or city would incur. What would those be? Or
So the project cost obviously would be the cost of materials, the cost of labor. Often we're contracting those out with other construction companies. So those costs would be associated with it. And now you would be adding through Senate Bill 57.
aren't the communications companies bearing the cost? And that's what they're asking to be reimbursed?
Yes, they would be asking for us to add that in with the rest of the project cost, because we're still doing the actual road work. This would just be moving their communications facilities out of the right-of-way so that we can expand a road or put in sidewalks or whatever that might be that the project actually entails.
Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have problems with just asking them to eat the cost of every time you have a project, and why shouldn't you budget that into the cost of if you're widening a road and, you know, they're providing service to the community. It just seems like an awful lot to ask. Otherwise, they may just decide it's not worth serving that community and just pull out.
One of the things that I think that is important when we think about this is that they're utilizing, they have not purchased any of the right-of-way in this particular situation. They're using a public asset, the public right-of-way, rather than using a private easement to place their facilities there, with the understanding that if we ever need to utilize that area for a street project or anything like that, that they will work with us as a community partner to move those particular items so that we can provide that road work.
Okay, all righty. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What incentives does the county have to make sure that you're designing something that has the lowest cost overall, including this cost of relocation? So if the county is not bearing it, then what incentive do the engineers have to make sure that they're trying to overall come up with the most effective and efficient plan?
I think there's always incentive to keep those costs low. So when county engineers are looking at a project, I think there's always an incentive because they are spending because they're spending tax dollars. There's always an incentive to make sure that they are keeping that cost as low as possible and that they aren't taking up more right-of-way than they need, that they aren't doing any more work than is needed to execute the project. So I think that incentive always exists naturally, simply because we are doing a public project with public money.
My only concern would be you've just asked this to be not public money, but money from a particular utility.
Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you know, Mr. Hall, that I am quite a localist, like my predecessor, former county commissioner. I did a project when we built a new building. We negotiated with City Garden City. They want to concrete the alley. And we actually went to a negotiation, and we paid half. The utilities went underground, and we did, 500 feet instead of 750. So it was a negotiation. So, and so two questions. One is that the current model where entities like your counties or the cities, and maybe Spencer would comment later, are they negotiating with these entities when these moves are required?
I think there is generally discussion being had between the project and the utilities, whoever they may be, to make sure that, one, I mean, as I think it's been mentioned by one of the other conferees, that these types of moves require coordination from everybody involved. So those discussions have to take place, whether we're in the planning phase or the execution phase, to make sure that these projects are completed on time, because time is money. And so it's important to make sure that we are communicating throughout that entire process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up. So why did pipeline, telegraph, I could figure out why telegraph was there first, and the other utilities get in there for reimbursement? Are they better lobbyists, or it's just historically what we've done?
I would imagine, and I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine that it's probably a lot of history tied into that. Certainly with telegraph, we can look back, the telegraph was probably around before a lot of the roads were there. So those kinds of things happened probably in history, but we're looking at this as additional cost in the now.
Mr. Chairman, KDOT's widening, thank God, Highway 156 between Jetmore and Hanston. That's my highway. And I'm trying to get a utility to put conduit in there, because when we fill out and get shoulders finally, they'll be there. It seems like this would put a chilling effect on the willingness of these communicators to do that, when it makes total sense to do it, because if we go to 4-lane, probably not my lifetime, but somebody's lifetime, somebody's going to tell them, you got to move it.
I can't speak to that specific project because I'm not familiar enough with that specific project. I think because this is the state of the current state of law, I think that is being estimated into the cost of placing those initially. We have to remember that we're not asking them to move these facilities all the time. That would be terribly inefficient. We're only asking them to move them when we are doing a project, which might be once every 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. We're not asking for this every day.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for your testimony. And I understand public projects are necessary and to improve the life of residents in the community, and they need to happen. I want to make sure I'm clear that currently when there are federally funded projects that oil, gas, water, electric, telegrams, they already have their relocation costs included in federal projects for reimbursement, is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
And you said that, well, you didn't really say why they were included and not broadband and things like that, but I would imagine that residents in the same areas where these public projects are happening would find that these days, to bring us up to date, that their access to broadband and digital is likewise as important as having telegram services available where they are, and having electric and water and oil and gas. So just thinking on, maybe they would consider that parity is important to continue to maintain their broadband access. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I think one of the other things that we look at is that, particularly here in Kansas, and I think you'll hear from the municipal utilities here momentarily, a lot of our electric and water and things like that are owned by municipalities. And so to not cover those costs would essentially just be the municipality paying for the municipality to do municipal work. So that may be part of the thought process, but I haven't researched that part of it, so I don't want to say that definitively.
If I may, just to follow up, and I realize that even when it's federally funded, those aren't free dollars either. I mean, we're all taxpayers, and it's impacting that budget of residents as well federally. So it seems, just some thoughts. So thank you.
Committee, we got any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Next up, we have Jolene Savage, Chief Counsel, Kansas Department of Transportation. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Jolene Savage. I'm the Chief Counsel for the Kansas Department of Transportation. KDOT is in opposition to Senate Bill 57. I have been listening to testimony, and I'm concerned there may be some misunderstanding. Any utility, cable, broadband, water, electric, gas, regardless of federal or state money. If it is on state highway right-of-way, it is there for free. They do not pay KDOT any type of a permit fee. They don't pay KDOT any type of an easement cost to be there. They are not an additional servitude on the easement. They go there for free. So if KDOT needs for them to move, and this is current law and current practice, they pay the cost to move. They don't pay to go in they don't pay for the ground they're in, but if they have to move someplace else, KDOT buys additional right-of-way. Again, they don't pay for that land. They have to pay to move their utility over. If they're a utility that's not on highway right-of-way, but they are on their own easement that they have purchased, that KDOT does not own, we, KDOT, reimburse for that move. If we expand our highway and then they have to move out, we reimburse them. We pay that cost of their new easement and we pay the cost for them to move. KDOT has submitted opponent written testimony, and in there you will find in fiscal year 24, and these are just the lettings in 24, we had 108 utilities that had to move. I believe 45 were on the right-of-way. I'm wrong. 63 were on the right-of-way. They paid on their dime. I don't know what it costs them. We worked with them on where they go. They pay for that. 45 were located off the highway right-of-way. Moving them cost KDOT $25.9 million. So if you assume these utilities are about the same, we're looking at another $35 million to move the 63 that were on right-of-way. She has told me my time is up. I stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, you got any questions on this one? You got one? Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a question that was asked before. You know, KDOT has been very gracious in helping the state expand broadband by allowing the use of their right-of-way. Would this, or do you believe that this might discourage that practice?
I will have to check with utility people, but it's my understanding we have very robust competition for placing broadband within our right-of-way.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Next up is Kimberly Jinker Swati, Kansas Municipal Utilities. Kimberly, welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Ginter-Swati, and I do appreciate the opportunity to appear this afternoon on behalf of KMU, who does stand in opposition to Senate Bill 57. And I must say, this is the Utilities Committee, and just based on the conversation, I feel like probably we should spend a decent amount of time discussing franchise fees agreements and how utilities are placed and all the different types of utilities that are in fact in the public right-of-way versus what a private easement might be. So that might be a helpful discussion point for this issue. Just a couple of points. Again, Kansas Municipal Utilities, we represent the electric, natural gas, water, and wastewater utilities all across the state. And I do want to draw your attention to, several of our member cities have also submitted testimony, including the city of Derby, who in their testimony said Senate Bill 57 would upend the current competitively neutral mandate in right-of-way management. And I think that's really important. We are required to treat all entrants into our public right-of-way the same. And so the premise of this bill alone is a challenge because it is creating a bit of a carve-out. Secondly, it's our understanding that under federally funded or federal aid projects, no other utilities are reimbursed for modifying or relocating our utilities. Our experience tells us that. Also, a couple of other points. The reimbursement for modifying or relocating communications facilities would open the door for other utilities located in the public right-of-way. Again, they're in the public right-of-way, so they're not paying for the right to be in that right-of-way. They're not paying for a private easement. And so if other utilities are requesting the same treatment, then all that does is just balloon the cost increases associated with that right-of-way management. We can continue to talk about, again, cost increases associated with the various projects for then having to move cable, water, electric, natural gas. And again, if it's a federally funded project, no one else is receiving that compensation. So, you know, I do think it's important to listen or to read through the comments, because I know we're very brief here today, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And I do think that that conversation about right-of-way management would be useful.
Thank you, Kimberly. Committee, we got any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Will Johnson, Butler County Administrator. That's my county, and I've been anxious to get Will up here where I could work him over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and
Welcome
members of
to-
the committee. Appreciate it. I think the KDOT spokesman really summed things up really nicely. And you got to look at this thing in 3 different phases. Cities operate a little differently than counties. Counties operate a little differently than the state. Counties don't get franchise fees. We do get telecommunication fees from cable providers now. That was allowed a few years ago. Some of those have entered into contracts with us for that, but that's only for customers they serve in the rural areas of our county. We don't get any money for telecommunications infrastructure that is going from one city to the other. So on a county road that may have telecommunications equipment in it, we may not benefit from that at all because we may not have any providers out in the rural area. But we would be responsible as a county to pay for those costs of relocation. Again, I know there's a big focus in the legislature this year with property taxes. Butler County is one of only a few counties in Kansas that doesn't have a sales tax. So every dollar we add to a project in project match comes from property tax dollars. We don't have any projects that we ever receive full federal funding for. Every project has a match that's made up of local property tax dollars. So I want to keep that in mind with everybody, that any cost that we're forced to incur, we have to pass on to our citizens. So I'll stand for any questions.
Committee, we got any questions for Will? Surely somebody's got one good tough one up there. Okay, Will, I'm going to let you off. Thank you. Thank you for driving up. Okay, next we got Spencer Duncan, Government Affairs Director, League of Kansas Municipalities. Spencer, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chair. I am Spencer, representing the cities of Kansas. 3 very quick points. The proponents told you the intent of this bill was to focus in on projects that have some sort of federal or state funding piece. If that is the intent, that is not how this bill is written. So if that is your goal and you want to move this forward, my attorney is iced in today, or else he would have been here, but we are happy to have that conversation with whomever we need to, revise or whatever, to make sure that that's actually its intent, because that's not what the language does. Right now, this language would tell me if I'm doing a little local project and I have to pay for that move, doesn't matter whether I'm getting any reimbursement, the city's on the hook for it. Obviously, if your intent is to include those projects, that's a much bigger conversation about what that would mean to impacting all projects we're doing and the cost of that to our local budgets. Second thing is, it doesn't really outline in here who's responsible for putting the costs together, right? It kind of leans in towards letting these private companies tell us, if you're going to make me pay for it, I would like something in the legislation that lets us have a part of the conversation of what that cost is. Let my engineers do some of that work, right? Not just be told this is what you owe us. Third thing is, I'm going to say this every time, there is a local control piece to this. This is why franchise agreements exist. While there are certainly outlines in state law, these are the kind of things that we do work with, negotiate, and have discussions with these companies when we enter into those franchise agreements. And this can all be negotiated through those. So that was it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we have any questions for Spencer? Senator Clifford.
Just to follow up that I asked Mr. Hall on negotiating these agreements.
Or you mean like when we're doing a project?
Yeah,
Well, it's all city to city, but the majority of cities absolutely, when they start these projects, bring in everyone involved, whether it's the utility companies, the engineers, whatever, city staff, and they all sit down at the same table and work out who's going to pay for what and how this is going to work. Yes, the majority of time, the private companies end up paying for those moves, but they are absolutely included in the conversation from step one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned in here that this is specific for owners and operators of communication and video services, and that it sets a precedence for other utilities. So are you saying that you would prefer we go ahead and amend other utilities into this legislation?
No, I'm worried about the reverse. Once you set this precedent, you want to talk about what's going to cost to move an Evergy pole? Right? No, I know. I'm just saying that's our fear. That's yeah.
Chairman, I just thought if he was offering an amendment.
You know, he was so happy to see me testify. Trust me.
Any other questions? Spencer, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I bring to your attention, there's like 9 letters of written opposition that you can review when you have time. Is there any other neutral testimony versus neutral or opponent or proponent? So we have no other proponent, opponent, or neutral testimony that's been submitted at this time. There's a fiscal note on SB 57 in front of the testimony. So with that, I will close the hearing on SB 57. This time we'll open the hearing on SB 81, and we'll bring Mr. Myers back up here and tell us about 81.
Okay, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Senate Bill 81, now we're talking about discounted economic development electric rates. And the current status of the law, it authorizes discounted economic development electric rates for certain new and expanded large commercial or industrial facilities that don't provide retail goods or services directly to the public, and then also comply with a few other requirements. So what this bill generally would do is it would prohibit the provision of a discounted economic development of electric rate for certain very large facilities that operate with a very high peak electric demand. In my memo, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I do have a chart that is attached there, and that is just an overview of the economic development electric rates that current law authorizes. And you can see there's some varying thresholds. Like the first one is for facilities that would have a peak demand of at least 200 kilovolts or more within the first 2 years, and then meet some other requirements. And they can qualify for up to an average discount of 20% on their electric rates for 5 years. Similarly, 300 kV facility can qualify for up to an average 40% discount for 5 years. And then for these, there's one for very large facilities that we just enacted last year of 25 megawatts or more, and then meet those other criteria. And those types of facilities can qualify for a 10-year discount with 40% discount on average over the first 5 years, and then a 20% discount for the remaining 5 years. So those are what are in current law. And so what Senate Bill 81 would do is it would prohibit a public utility from providing a discounted economic development electric rate to, as I said, a facility with a very high peak electric demand. So these would be facilities that are projected to have a peak demand of 40 megawatts or above within the first 2 years. And then the facility would not qualify if it is projected to have a full-time workforce of less than 200 employees, or if that facility is not receiving service pursuant to a data center or large load tariff. So again, facilities would not qualify if they're at that 40 megawatt or above threshold, and they're not going to have 200 employees, or they're not receiving service pursuant to that data center or large load tariff. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Senator Peterson.
Are those first two supposed to be kilowatts?
Let's see, Senator Peterson. Yes, you're correct. I should not have KV. You're correct. Yes, the law does specify kilowatts. Thank you.
Committee, you got any other questions? Okay, thank you, Nick. Okay, we start into proponents. First of all, we have Paul Snyder, Kansas, for lower electric rates. Paul, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Snyder with Kansas for Lower Electric Rates. The goal here, I'll try and breeze through this. You've got the written stuff. The goal here is to target Evergy's economic development rates to long-term job producers. There's a finite amount of discounts let's get the next Panasonic with 4,000 employees instead of other customers that have far fewer employees that don't provide the same sort of value to their communities in the state employment roles. So as Nick mentioned, these discounts first were enacted in 2020. We supported that bill. There were adjustments last year. We supported that as well. We are a big believer that large energy users will help put downward pressure on rates, and I've been on record saying that before. What we have now is a different scenario with data centers. Historically, data centers, a good-sized data center was 20 to 50 megawatts. Today's data centers are 10 to 20 times bigger than that. There are announcements in Ohio and other places for a 1 gigawatt data center. Kansas cannot support something like that, of that size right now. So why would we offer a discount to them? That's really our main point, is that with a finite amount of power that we currently have, Evergy's seeking to add a gigawatt and a half of power through gas plants and solar plants and other things. And so clearly we don't have the power that we need today and to meet future needs. So why would we offer discounts for something we don't have? And so in particular on data centers or any other cryptocurrency or whoever else wants to pull up and have a massive load, that's why these requirements are to have employees, a certain number of employees, and also to get on one of these large load or data center tariffs that's under development at the KCC. Those tariffs, I've not seen them, I'm aware of them, but they are intended to shield existing customers from new costs that would need to come online to support new customers. So that's really all we're trying to do, is both, again, target discounts to long-term job producers and to make sure that existing customers are insulated from rate increases just to support the development of a new customer. And with that, I will stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
Committee, any questions? Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Paul. And these data centers are going to require additional construction by the facilities, utilities, or whomever. So that cost is probably going to be passed along to the customer anyhow, and just drive up the cost of electricity rather than drive it down, correct?
A lot of times a new customer will be required to pay a certain part of their facility. So for instance, if a new substation needs to be constructed within a quarter mile or so and run a line to a facility, typically that new customer will pay for that substation and new line to a facility. But we've got broader grid requirements, we've got transmission lines that need to be built and other things. I think it is unclear how those costs get passed on to customers. We're trying to ensure that it doesn't happen. You might have recalled there was a lot of consternation about the Panasonic facility and new costs associated with that, whether Wichita was paying for that. I don't know if that's a settled issue. I do know Panasonic has pledged they're paying what it takes to serve them, but we haven't seen that yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I would just note to everyone, we're not against data centers per se. We're against giving discounts to them. As far as I know, they are not price sensitive. They will go wherever they can find power, wherever there is broadband. So again, if they come in and pay basically whatever price, why would we give them a discount?
Any other questions, committee? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Next up, we have Eric Stafford, Vice President of Government Affairs, Kansas Chamber. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I forgot my iPad at home this morning, so I'm going to try and do this from my phone. And appreciate the opportunity to be here in support of Senate Bill 81, Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber. Yeah, we supported the creation of this program when Evergy brought the, I think it was called the SEED program back in 2020 as a way to encourage investment in our state, especially for large industrial users, and feel like it's a good program, feel like it's been working. Part of that you see in our written testimony, the reference to the London Economic Study is that growing the state, getting more large energy users on here is a good thing for the state, that you can spread the cost, lower rates essentially, in theory. We haven't seen that yet, but the concern with data centers is that they do use so much energy, and that program was created for job creators, and we do have members that are interested in the data center policies that are being discussed here in the state, but we're largely talking high energy users with a small number of permanent jobs. And if they are going to take such a large capacity, and you know, Evergy's looking at building 2 natural gas facilities here in the state, probably necessary. If you guys were on the Joint Commerce Committee and heard our economist who came in and talked about needs and concerns from the business community nationwide, energy availability is a very, very top concern. But along with that, especially here in Kansas, come energy costs. So those do continue to be a concern for our members. We would prefer that for those large industrial users that we save the discount rates for the benefit to the state, which is the jobs created, the income taxes generated, property taxes paid from the employees, and find another way to address the data centers. Some of the attorneys that we work with that deal specifically in economic development, they have suggested charging data centers a higher utility cost because they want to go to states where they know that they have energy and they'd be willing to pay a little bit more. And your hand is up, so I'm done. So you can read a little bit more on that in our written comments. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to hear some of these things that they're not the price doesn't affect those data centers, because while we're talking about data centers not bringing a lot of jobs, I mean they would in fact bring quite a bit of property tax money, and they don't require us to educate children in schools and build extra roads, and you know there's a lot that comes with that also. So while I'm definitely somebody that likes to get more jobs in the state, denigrating a property tax revenue source that doesn't have a lot of costs is kind of nice too. But I was glad to hear that about the price issue. Can you expand on that a little bit more? Have you seen that's been stated by them, or that they're going to high cost areas? Or
yeah, good question, Senator and Mr. Chairman. I don't. I actually have a call on Friday on this with some of our members. So hope to get more feedback, and I'm going to be asking that question because there's the policy being considered about the incentives that are out there, and creating kind of like what I view as more of like a HPIT program, because they don't create enough jobs to qualify, but the investment is significant, and it is good property tax base. They are needed. There is a need, but they are looking at states that have adequate energy supply, and Kansas is fortunate to have adequate energy supply. But in our view, from the discounted rate perspective, that was kind of tied to job creation. And in our, you know, if I remember from the hearings, I know Evergy might have different philosophy because they want more customers, and I understand Evergy wanting more customers in hopes that it helps us. But maybe there's a way that you can tie that in with an energy program that provides them the reliable energy, but then they pay more to help lower everybody else's rates. I don't know if they would be supportive or not. I could be saying something that they totally hate, but it's what our folks who work in the economic development world have said might be a reasonable solution that takes attorneys and frustrations out of the policy debate.
Any other questions, committee? Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You know, I think what I want to do is we're going to cut that here because we're running out of time. We're due down on the floor at 2:30. Mr. Casley, I'm sorry to leave you on WebEx, but I want to make sure that you got time when we do this, so we will continue this later. Just need to look at the schedule and see where that fits. So with that, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.